Are you troubled by foolishness, extravagance, egoism, treachery, laziness? Here's what the men that fought in the greatest war can teach you. In a time when comfort and prosperity weakened men to the point where some ended up doubting their own manhood, in an era when many times the biggest crisis a man will ever face is the loss of connection to the internet, we seem to have forgotten the important things in life, elements that have guided men in the past, ideals that have built in men the courage to put their lives on the line in front of horrendous challenges. Every generation has its share of men who fully live and express their manhood, friend, but there may never have been a generation when the number of honorable men of strength and character was higher than the generation who had to endure the famine of the Great Depression of the 1920s and then face boldly the horrors of the Second World War, coming home to destroyed countries and cities, carrying their scars proudly while rebuilding the nations of the Western world into economic powerhouses. Such men knew the power of sacrifice, both in terms of material possessions and of real blood, sweat and tears. Humble men who never bragged about what they had done or been through. Loyal, patriotic and level-headed men who, believe it or not, weren't made out of different material than you and me, but when faced with great hardships, they managed to rise to the occasion. Their extraordinary manhood is not something that you can scientifically measure, friend, but you can feel it by only looking at old photos or videos or listening to the stories of the past. And before you get another impulse to complain about the weak internet connection or the beefsteak that was a bit overdone, let us take this opportunity to think of a few lessons of manhood that we can learn from the men that fought for and built the societies that we now take for granted. As many men in our generation shrink in front of responsibility, look back, friend, to the men of your grandfather's time and notice how they appreciated every chance they got to step up to the plate and test their grit. For them, responsibility was their coffee. They took it head on, and every time they had a chance to get a task and be responsible, they felt alive and thriving. They took pride in personal accountability and accepted all the consequences of their decisions, whether good or bad. In a time when individuals and businesses were hitting rock bottom in a blink of an eye, in an era when financial and personal security was only a luxurious dream. As consumption is being promoted more and more, try to remember your grandparents' lifestyles, if you were lucky enough to have met them. Living in such uncertain times, they probably had a sort of pack rat mentality, because the next bag of potatoes or pair of pants was not guaranteed. They learned to live on less and be grateful for the things they had, no matter how humble. It did not take a brand new car to brighten your grandpa's Christmas morning. A written postcard or even a used book was enough to brighten his spirits. Learn from the men of that generation, friend. Learn that you do not need a Ferrari to ease your midlife crisis, nor a mansion to be seen as successful. Take this lesson to heart and be grateful for what you have. Use your possessions until they wear out. Fix them if they get broken, and do not pursue consumerism to feel fulfilled. There are many stories of grandsons who find some war medal stashed in an old box in their grandfather's house. Medal the grandfather never talked about. Even if his exploits had been brave and heroic, he rarely talked about the war. It may be because of the difficulty of remembering such carnage, but another reason for that is also the sense that he had simply fulfilled his duty, and thus there is no reason to brag. Men simply did what was expected of them, protect those who they loved dearly. There was no reason to talk about it, and it made no sense to ask for recognition for it. It was simply something that needed to be done, something surrounded by a code of silence, where actions spoke alone. The men of that generation took their marriage vows seriously. They saw marriage as a commitment, and divorce was not an option. Their commitment to their loving wives was unshakable, and even though through such challenging times they had their arguments, many times thinking of killing each other due to war, poverty and hardships, they never gave up on one another. If you are a bit cynical, friend, you might think that because people never gave up on one another simply means that many were stuck in unhappy marriages, living lives of quiet desperation. Living a lot among people of that generation, I can share with you that they were fulfilled together. They were companions and best friends, and even if death separated them after 50 plus years of marriage, you could still see love in their eyes even a decade after their partner passed away. War has a way to teach you to focus on the objective at hand and not to give up until that objective is accomplished, because your life depends on it. When the soldiers of the Second World War got home to destroyed cities, they carried out that focus over to the world of work. The men of that generation were never concerned with finding their passion because they could find happiness in any job they did, since they weren't just working for personal fulfillment. They labored hard for something bigger, to give their families the financial and personal security they had not enjoyed in their whole existence, and they understood that the good things in life must be earned by honest toil. Remember, friend, next time you want to give up, that the reason these men were admirable was because of the challenges that they faced, and because they did not shy away in front of difficult pursuits, with the belief that the easier life is, the happier they'll be. Understand from this what your grandfather knew. You cannot have the sweet without the bitter, and true happiness comes from overcoming the kind of challenges that build your character and refine your soul. If there is something to take away from a generation of men that faced the most horrifying challenges of our existence, it is this: be a man of common sense and have a level-headed approach to life. Stop obsessing about finding yourself or finding the perfect woman or your passion. Life is not supposed to be lived in such a complicated way. You do not need to be on a diet constantly to be in shape. You do not need to obsess over your relationship to have a great one. You do not need to focus fanatically on trends to look sharp, and you do not need to overthink every action that you take to get things done. In this time of comfort created by the toil of previous generations, I dare you, friend, to look back at the men of the past and carry in your heart the lessons which they shared with us through their actions. Will you be wise enough to honor the past by learning the lessons others had to discover with the price of blood and human life, or will you be ignorant of them until, God forbid, history repeats itself? The choice is yours to make.